Welcome to the Horror Screens Podcast, an extension of the Horror Screens Video Vault website. I am your host Peter, alongside Stephen, and in this episode we will be talking about the 1981 slasher movie X-Ray, which runs in with our theme of Valentines and love going slightly wrong in horror movies. So now the intro's out of the way, we're going to find out what Stephen has been watching since the last podcast, which hasn't been a lot of time between the two due to technical issues, but I haven't watched anything, and if I have, I can't remember what it is. But Here's Stephen with what he's been watching since the last podcast.
Oh, hello there. Yes, well, I've managed to shoehorn in a couple of things. Do people still use shoehorns?
You can still buy them, so presumably, but they're not like the funky old-style wooden ones. They're more like plastic, that stuff that you see floating around inside turtles a lot nowadays.
Oh, yeah. And they apparently enjoy it, right? That's rejuvenate their existence, yeah.
Oh, yeah, they really enjoy it as much as humans enjoy ingesting all sorts of little bits of plastic microbes and things like that.
Which we're all doing all of the time, right? So, I mean, I'm sure that's not hurting us at all and not causing problems that will be a real issue down the line, right?
No, I can't remember. I read it somewhere that there was... Sorry if we were going a bit of a tangent, we suddenly turned into a Greenpeace spiel thing. But it's
now on Greenpeace.
But I did read somewhere that apparently you take up so much microbes of plastic every day, but so by the time you've had a lifetime, you can probably have about a half a kilo of plastic.
Wow.
In you. So that's a lot of plastic you've been ingesting over your lifetime.
So we're like those whales that they find dead with 300 plastic bags up their bottom.
Yeah, but just a very small one. We've got more like a Kinder Egg toy inside us.
Wow, that sounds amazing. We're the best species, right? Oh, humans are great.
Oh yeah, I don't know if
being human.
I don't know if you've seen this ad. There's an advert for a program coming out. It's got Steve Buscemi as God, which I just think is great for a start.
Wow.
But I can't remember. I think it's called Heavens. It might be called Heavens Inc. or something. It's not something I particularly watch, but it's a comedy thing, and he says, does an announcement to all his like angels and whatever, and says something like that. I've got a plan. I'm going to blow up Earth. And I thought, yeah, he probably does think that sometimes. This little Thanos click away, and NASA's gone.
Why not?
But anyway, let's jump back into what you've recently seen.
Oh, films. Yeah, so I've seen a few since we last recorded, which, as you rightly say, was quite recent due to technical issues. Mm-hmm. What I did watch recently was a particularly good crowd-funded documentary called Making Apes.
I haven't got around to watching it yet.
I
was going to.
Oh, man. Yeah, this is lovely. It's got a host of people like Del Toro's in there, Greg Nicotero, a whole bunch of famous makeup effect people. And it's essentially about the revolutionary makeup in Planet of the Apes, as you can probably guess from the title. Yeah. But it's mostly kind of about Thomas Berman, who's one of the major makeup effects artists of the last kind of 40 years or so, who worked on Planet of the Apes. And obviously Planet of the Apes is now of a certain age where a lot of the people involved are no longer here. So he's talking about that, but he's also by extension talking about how it's impacted on his career. And it's really touching. It's really lovely. People like Rick Baker pop up, but it's not so much about the big names that you'd usually expect in things like this. It's more about just the legacy of the great makeup from that film. And you kind of take it for granted, but this movie was revolutionary for what it did. It was a risky move by 20th Century Fox in the late 60s at a point where they were nearly bankrupt. And it paid off. And it led to people like Rick Baker coming along and doing more things with makeup effects. So it was crowdfunded, as we said, and it's really, really good. Making Apes. Yeah, great watch.
Well, it came through for like, review and whatever, and I was like, oh, I know somebody that's gonna like that as much as me, because I love the Planet of the Apes films, not just the old ones, but I like all of them. I even like the one that a lot of people slag off, which is the Tim Burton one.
Yeah,
but they've all got their own little charm. But I grew up with the old ones, so my love has always been for the prosthetics and all that kind of thing, and Roddy McDowall and all that type of stuff. So yeah,
me too. Me too, actually. And the nice thing about the documentary is that it's not there to kind of, as you suggest, it's not there to critique the Tim Burton one or the new ones. It's just there to kind of cover the path from the old ones through to the newest ones. But in the meantime, just document the individual experience of the makeup artists that are involved in all of them. Because of course Rick Baker came back for the Tim Burton version.
He did,
which is cool. And it's a lovely film, man. And you also get to hear like people like John Landis and Joe Dante talk about their favorite Planet of the Apes films from the original 5, all of which are actually really interesting. And we've all got our own favorites, but they're all really cool in their own way.
I can't think of any of them that I would put lower down in rankings of anything. Because obviously you see them that. The original ones, you can see that the budget's getting smaller and smaller. You know, when you got like 500 apes and suddenly there's a big battle at the end of the last one, there's like 2 apes. You say, think, hang on, it's a big old bit of a budget problem here. But I really like the new trilogy as well. I thought they was a good sort of reimagining, but also linking up still to the original 5.
Yeah, the new trilogy is great. Absolutely. And they do have a lot of respect and a lot of connections to the old ones, and it's made with they're all made with love, and the CGI is really good. It's probably the best example we have in recent years of, and there's a humongous amount of CGI in those ones, of the use of CGI in what are kind of character-driven, story-driven films, and not for once, not franchises that are just about the big action sequences. Yeah, they're great.
So what else you've been watching?
I also watched the more of a family watch this, but it still qualifies, I think. I watched the new Addams Family movie, which is the CGI animation film that came out at the end of last year.
Yeah, I think it's at Christmas time it came out.
Yeah.
Which maybe is a little odd time for a Halloween-ish type movie, but there you go.
Hang on a minute. Yeah, exactly. It's one of those weird ones, which I don't think, I presume it cost a bunch of money, but it's kind of snuck out there. There's just so many family films, so many horror films, obviously, around at any given time. So this one slipped through the cracks. And it had terrible reviews. It's not that bad. It has an interesting cast, like Bette Midler's in it. Hilariously, probably the best joke in the film, if it is a joke, is they presumably paid Snoop Dogg... the Snoop Dogg, a lot of money to get prominent billing. He's maybe, 5th billing in the opening titles as Cousin It. So he obviously it could be anybody that turns up in a recording studio and makes a bunch of noises and goes home. But it's Snoop Dogg. So I like the fact that Snoop Dogg got paid probably $1 million just to turn up and make some weird sounds.
Well, it's a bit like Vin Diesel as Groot, isn't it?
It's the same thing. So he's got a great agent. It's not that bad. It's had terrible reviews. And it's got the expected joke. It's got a lot of horror movie references to Pennywise, to the Amityville Horror, the Get Out line from Amityville Horror gets used a lot. Yeah, and a few others. But what it does make you realise, I suppose, it makes you appreciate not just the original series, which is really witty, but the 1990s movies, which are really, I think, compared to this, are a lot darker, a lot meaner. They've got a lot more kind of quite sinister jokes. This is playing it a bit more safe. And because it's animated in that kind of generic sort of Tim Burton-ish CGI version that they're using for this, it feels a bit anonymous. But it's still worth a watch, I would say. But it just makes you appreciate the other ones more.
Oh. Well, I have got it on my vast to watch list, but by the time I've probably watched it, they've probably made 600 sequels to it, so...
Here they come.
Yeah,
no doubt. Yeah. It's all right. Don't put it at the top of your list. Put it around number 673, if there's a space.
Okay. Just underneath the 90s Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh, yeah. I'll put it a bit further down, actually, in that case. Down there. Yeah.
I have seen that Buffy the Vampire Slayer film a very long time ago. I think it's one of the first things in the UK that was on Channel 5.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, what should we put up on our new terrestrial channel? How about Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
This will get the viewers in?
Yep.
I like Channel 5 in the early days because it's the one place you could have as a massive source of movies starring Shannon Tweed showing at 11 o'clock on a Friday night.
Yep, it's Sexy Time with Shannon Tweed.
And they all had names like Lethal Instinct.
Yep. Dead Before Bed.
Basic Attraction. Yeah, they were great. I miss those days. It was a time machine.
They start getting on this reality crap that apparently lots of people watch, but they're really good for the production companies because they're really cheap to make.
Yeah.
So they make them really cheaply, and people, amount of viewers that come in to watch it, channels are going to be paying them hundreds upon hundreds just to say, yeah, let's do another series of that, where everybody's at home really going, why are they making another series?
Yeah, that's what's happened, isn't it?
Yeah.
Used to have a lot more kind of weirdo cult TV series on British TV. I suppose that's what made Dracula, the recent Dracula, quite interesting. Whatever its faults, at least they were doing it and do something a bit different.
Yeah. Well, now you know what your TV license was going for.
Wow. Where do you write for refunds for a TV license?
Oh, you can't get refunds. No refunds for that.
You do hear stories of like people that have like complained to the cinema because the film they just watched was rubbish. Like, I'd like my money back. This film was nowhere near, and they just hadn't enough willies in it. Rubbish. Holocaust.
Well, you was watching Titanic. Why was you expecting willies to be in anyway?
Oh, well, that wasn't necessarily my complaint, but just my friend Stephen. So recently seen. Yeah, I also watched Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Also, still haven't seen.
So this is the, as you probably know, this is the adaptation of the kind of quite famous and, in America, controversial young adult horror stories by the writer whose name I've forgotten. Oh, God.
So right now, I had his name in my head. You carry on. I will go. I use our
if
friend,
only there was a way to check.
I'll go ask our friend Jeeves. Maybe not Jeeves.
I'll check out. Hang on. I think it's on my MySpace page. Just let me have a look. Oh no, Bebo. Nope, still not there. Hang on, it's coming through.
Is it?
Is it Alvin Schwartz? No, that sounds like a made-up name.
No, that is right. Based on the children's book series of the same name by Alvin Schwartz.
His chipmunk friends were fantastic and instrumental in his success as a horror writer.
Yes.
Yeah. The interesting thing about those stories, of course, is that in the kind of Bible Belt dumb fuck parts of America, they were really controversial. And the great documentary, which I'm sure was called Just Scary Stories, kind of covers just how important those books were to a whole generation of kids that were, being introduced to horror, but also the reaction by the PTA groups and various authority figures that wanted them banned because they didn't think children needed to learn about death and nasty things like sex and bodies and willies and ghouls.
Yeah. Well, as Stephen was saying, the dumb, naughty word that he used, parts of America. There's parts of that in every country. Even England's got parts of that.
Oh, God, yes.
We're not saying where, but it begins with an N and ends in K.
That's I would admit that's Dracula backwards. It was a trick.
No, we don't. I don't know. We have got, every country's got some of those weirdo parts, but yeah, I can't remember where it was. It was somewhere over here when like Are You Afraid of the Dark was showing in the 90s, and there was like complaints to like the Mirror and something that it was corrupting our children's childhood. They come back from school when they're supposed to be doing homework and they're being corrupted by these sinister stories of things around the campfire. Yes, I suspect all these kids that are at home, we've got their algebra and all that, so they're really thinking, oh my God, at any given moment, a swamp monster may come out my toilets and attack me.
Absolutely. England, in fact, has the most stupid, probably in the whole world, the most stupid moral panics over the years. My favourite headline, one of them, from a UK tabloid, whose name shall not be mentioned, The Sun, in the 80s was...
Oh, The Moon.
The Moon. Bearing in mind, this is the tabloid that had headlines like Gays Go Home and talked about the gay plague of AIDS back in the 80s because they were such a heinous and remained such an awful bunch of toilet paper. In fact, not good enough to be toilet paper. Ran over.
It's more. It's more. Most people would probably consider it a bit like that paper that you used to get when you was at school, and it ripped your ass to pieces when you're wiping it.
Yeah, like the tracing paper toilet paper.
Oh yes, that stuff.
Yeah, basically The Sun is that, but much more useless. In fact.
Well, page 3, I think some people would argue about, but
Oh, page 3. Or if something bad happened, like a terrible terrorist attack,
So
it'd be pushed to page 8.
I was going to say page 3.
Yeah. Oh, look at them buildings. Yeah. So, yeah, my favourite of these stupid English things that happened in the 80s was I heard the voice of Video Michael, which was a reference to Halloween 4, where the son blamed some idiot that went and stabbed someone. They blamed his actions on Halloween 4, where, of course, we know Michael Myers talks all the time.
He does. He talks.
Just chattering away.
Yeah, he's always talking, but the trouble is the sound people that worked on every single last one of the Halloween movies never actually got the mic in place so we can actually hear what he's saying. He could have been saying some very philosophical things about it before he's killing, explaining why he's actually killing these people. Maybe they've done bad things in the past that we don't know about, but all we're really seeing is this lone man going around killing people, and he's the one that's getting all the bad stick.
Yeah. Oh, God, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, I'm going to just go and rewatch the Halloween films. Thanks for the tip, man. Bear with me. Back in a minute.
And Stephen's now looking back at all the Halloween movies, probably thinking what's gone wrong with Michael, and probably slagging off Halloween 2, the Rob Zombie one, because he really hates that one.
Wait a minute. What? He's a redneck? What? Oh, I'm back. Sorry. Hello. Yeah, he's a genius, man. The last we listened. Yeah, so I don't know what my original point was. But yeah, so yeah, The Sun is awful. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is a kind of film version of those Alvin Schwartz and the Chipmunks novels, which are actually really important in terms of that era and horror aimed specifically at that kind of audience, and didn't talk down to them, which I think really comes across in the Scary Stories documentary. That is well worth checking out. This movie has a great pedigree. It's produced and co-written by Del Toro. It's made by the guy that made Troll Hunter and The Autopsy of Jane Doe, I believe.
I like Troll Hunter. That's the found footage thing, wasn't it?
Yes, a really good one. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's that, and but I like both of that. I really like The Autopsy of Jane Doe and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. The guy's a very talented man, and it's not a bad film. It's set in the late 60s. It's got some nice period detail. It's got some nice, fairly likable characters, but it's just not scary. Even taken as a kind of, as we said, whatever you call it, however patronizing you want to be, young adult horror story. It's not different to the Goosebumps movie that I thought was really good and really nailed the sense of humor and the scares quite well, and was in the spirit of the original TV series, and had some good jokes about Stephen King, that kind of stuff. This is a bit bland, and there's way too much CGI. And as we know, CGI generally is not that great in terms of being scary when it's realizing things like creepy scarecrows and that kind of stuff. So, to be honest, I was more distracted by the CGI, which is okay, but it's not scary. And the longer it goes on, the kind of more feeble the creatures or the ghosts become. So I came away thinking, I mean, it's made a lot of money. It was a big hit. Hopefully, it pleased some audiences, but maybe I was just hoping for a bit more, especially as I really liked the Goosebumps movie that came out. So Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, not one that I'll probably watch again.
The documentary that you mentioned, that came out by Wilder Releasing, I believe.
Nice. That's well worth a watch.
Yeah, that was the thing. That was the thing I was more interested in, is the documentary as opposed to the movie. So
yeah, definitely.
Each to their own.
Each to their own. Documentary is well worth a look because it does really cover the importance of horror. Actually, the whole documentary is not just about these books, which are really good, but it's just about how the culture, and especially the grown-ups in certain parts of the world, America or England, as you said, they're everywhere, unfortunately, need to be reminded that horror is a hugely important part of growing up, whether that's in the horrific fairy stories, the classics, which are grotesque and gruesome, like Hansel and Gretel, or whether it's in sneaking downstairs to watch Halloween 19 late at night when you're 9. Any of those things, they're all really important. We could just hide them from children. I'm sure no bad can come from that. Anyway, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so anything else, or was that it?
Finally, I rewatched the 1980s Prom Night.
I've seen that
Everything's
one
alright.
many, many times.
Yay! Pete's seen it.
I have
Woohoo.
the soundtrack here
Prom night. Everything's alright.
on shiny disc.
Oh, God bless you. I love the soundtrack's great. Prom night's fantastic, and reading or even watching the extras. I didn't read them because that'd be weird. But watching the extras on the very nice new edition from 101 Films, which I think is using some of the extras from the Screen Factory release, but some are new. I found out that they were originally planning to use, and in fact, they filmed the great disco sequences with disco classics like I Will Survive, but then the producers got nervous. They were like, oh, shiza, how much does it cost for Gloria Gaynor? And basically Paul Zaza, the composer, had to quickly, in about the space of a week, write and sort out 6 disco songs that sounded almost exactly like the famous ones, but not quite.
They're not the same, Stephen. They are not the same.
Well, the phrase the producers used was write
Similar.
them so close that we will get sued, but not close enough so that the suing is not successful, basically. So, but when you watch it, you're like, wow, that's so much like I Will Survive, but not quite.
Well, the soundtrack CD has the music in it that's actually used in the film, but it has also a load of stuff that they was potentially going to use that was composed for it. So it's worth a listen. I will send it to you so you can listen to it.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. I mean, the soundtrack is a lot of fun. And the movie's great, actually. I'd forgotten how good Prom Night was. You know, it's been copied a lot. It was one of the early slasher films. We'll be talking about another one very soon. And you forget, actually, how good it is and how likable the characters are. And the mystery is quite good. The killer is unusually sympathetic. And it, as with a few of these things like The Fog and Terror Train and Road Games is another one, it makes you, it reminds you, I suppose, that all those people that were like, oh, Jamie Lee Curtis always played the same character in slasher films. Actually, no, she didn't. Like with a couple of the others, in this one, she's far from Laurie. She's the popular girl. She's the prom queen. And she's very confident, and like with Laurie, actually, in a similar way, she's quite resilient at fending off the killer in the final act. But a very different character and really well played, and a really fun film with disco. It's the best disco slasher movie.
Well, there aren't many of those. So.
There's also, hang on a minute. It'll come back to me. And it's got Leslie Nielsen in it.
Yes.
And he's great.
Isn't he? He's more of a straight-laced character in that, isn't he? I recall. He's not playing his usual comedy shtick or whatever. Yeah, or whatever, yeah.
Accidentally driving into a fireworks factory.
Yeah.
He's the straight, like with a lot of these slasher films, they cast like quite famous older actors to be the token dad. In this case, he's the dad and also the principal of the school. It's really good and it's really well done. It's not as gory as the majors, I suppose, like Friday the 13th, but it doesn't need to be. There's some good suspense and disco dancing.
Unless you haven't gathered, Stephen really likes disco dancing. He likes to put on his lycra hot pants and go out on his rollerblades round and round and round the oval.
Man, these hot pants are actually quite
hot,
tight.
Real hot.
They're pretty hot as well. You did say put them on now, right? Just a second.
No.
I'm glad I picked this week to shave my legs. Here we go. Right, back in a minute. Oh, sorry.
Christ. So, is that it? Is that all you've watched?
I've tried ever so hard. So the message is go watch Making Apes, go rewatch Prom Night, and the others, you don't have to worry about the others.
Oh, okay. Well, as a good little thing that Steve has done then, talking about Prom Night at the end, because our main focus today is, for Retro Rewind, X-Ray, which is a slasher film from the 80s. In fact, it's from 1981, and it's directed by an Israeli director, which I didn't know.
Yes.
Which I thought was quite surprising when I found out. I knew the name, but I didn't know he was Israeli, so I was quite surprised by that.
He's an interesting guy, isn't he? He's done loads of stuff. He always crops up. You see him as executive producer on like the Rambo movies and stuff. He's big in there with the Hollywoods.
Well, I suppose it's all those sex comedies he made. I suppose even though you think about a lot of those sort of things, you think they're only for a certain market, but I suppose if they've been thrown in the front of something else, just as a as a cheap bit of rubbish to watch before, I don't know, Expendables or something, and people are like, oh, well, actually, this guy makes these movies, but he's actually doing quite well at it, so maybe we should give him a chance. So,
yeah, it's
and it worked out.
Yeah, he made he made the Lemon Popsicle, or some of the Lemon Popsicle movies, which were those. I guess they were Israeli, right? Those Israeli teen sex comedies.
Yeah, that's got
dubbed and
yes.
But he also directed in America The Last American Virgin. America.
Which was basically a remake of one of his Lemon Popsicle films.
Yeah, and you know what? Arrow released it some time ago, and I don't think I'd watched it before, and it's actually a really good one. It's not even really qualify as a teen sex comedy because it's so depressing. It's got
like a teenager then, depressing.
Yeah, exactly. It's an authentic teenage film. It's got such a downbeat ending. You know, it's dealing with big issues like, oh God, abortion, God, and abortion. And Diane Franklin from Amityville 2, the one that shags her brother, it's suggested. She's the star. It's a really good film. But presumably it was marketed as a kind of Porky style comedy jolly romp, and people went to it going, oh my God, this is a bit dark.
Well, Porky's 4 is a bit depressing, isn't it?
What happened?
So, I suppose you've got loads of notes on this film because you would have seen it countless times, and I'm sure you mentioned this in one of your slash hit volumes back in the day.
Oh, the old days. Yeah. This was one of the key films. I mean, it's part of a cycle, mini cycle, really, of hospital slasher movies. So around the same time you had Halloween 2. Yep. I'm going to be a little more controversial here and say this is more fun than Halloween 2. It really is. Anyway, we also had things like Visiting Hours, which was the one with William Shatner.
Which has I always remember the trailer. The trailer is awesome. It's got that bit where they're showing the outside of the hospital and the lights are going off bit by bit till you get that skull showing. I think that's a great image. I think it's on the poster great. As well, isn't it?
It's on the poster. It's carried over to the DVD cover, or I think the Anchor Bay release a long time ago. The movie, this also we'll kind of go through the synopsis and stuff in a minute, but this movie also reminded me of the late 70s movie Coma, because Coma is all about capturing how we're all really paranoid about hospitals, like, oh Christ, what are they going to do, and what invasive bodily procedures will they do to us. And there's a sense, especially in how ridiculous X-ray gets, there's a sense that it's just some kind of paranoid nightmare in someone's head that they're about to have a hospital appointment, and this is the worst case scenario, that they'll wind up in a mad hospital like this one, because it is completely mad. There's no reassuring presence in this hospital whatsoever.
No.
And this is a woman that's just there for a routine checkup. So it taps into a kind of tradition of hospital paranoia that you see reoccurring in things like later on, The Ambulance, the Larry Cohen film. And there's a 90s slasher film called Exquisite Tenderness, which is dealing with the same kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's part of that cycle as well as being part of the original 80s slasher movie cycle. Yeah.
Yes. So, shall we jump in then? So, give me a brief synopsis of this movie. Well, you basically said the synopsis of the movie pretty much there anyway. It's a woman going in to have normal checkup, but everything's not quite particularly right in the hospital. That's pretty much the gist of it. But the woman is played by Playboy pinup Barbie Benton, which I knew absolutely nothing of.
Her name is Barbie.
Yeah, that's it. That's all I knew. But apparently she did something else called Death Stalker or something.
Wow. Oh, is that those kind of low-budget fantasy films?
Yeah, I think that Cannon did it. Well, I don't know if it was Cannon did that one, but yeah, she did stuff like that. But she didn't do much else after that. And she was one of Hugh Hefner's... Well, she's one of Hugh Hefner's longest-standing sort of girlfriends, as opposed to his usual,
long-term relationships.
Yeah. You're pushing past 21 now, so off you go on to the next one. But apparently, in the Hugh Hefner house, her name was like saying the devil in the house after she had been dating him for so long because, of course, all the other girls are in there trying to get in their edgeways with Hugh Hefner, but of course her name was still floating around because it's the one that, in his eyes, got away, kind of thing. Not got away as in he's tying up all these girls in the bottom of his basement.
That never happened, surely.
Not for cheap thrills, no.
Oh, that's a shame. Yeah, she's got a great superhero named Barbie Benton, like Peter Parker. She could have had a whole, like a superhero franchise of her own. Not very good actress woman could be her superhero name.
I don't know. Compared to some of the actresses I've seen in films, she did better than some of them.
It's like Renee Zellweger, a hamster staring up at the sun.
I haven't seen that. Is that any good?
Yeah, that's her first film. Yeah, it's quite low budget.
Oh, okay. But the poster to the film pretty much tells you everything you need to know. It's the checkup that became a nightmare. It's pretty much... What was you going to say?
Oh no, this movie is just such a gem, isn't it? It really is. My favorite, or actually there's about 300 favorite bits, but there's a great moment where she's found, in this bizarre hospital, which is kind of, sometimes there's no staff and sometimes there's about 300 staff at the same time. She finds the doctor at last. Her real doctor's been killed, so she finds this creepy substitute and she's really worried about everything. Oh, is it serious? And he says, no, it's nothing. She says, oh, don't worry, you can tell me the truth. And he says, yeah, it might be. What the fuck?
It might be. You never know.
Just absolutely mental. We must talk first, of course, about the traditional slasher movie prologue.
Yeah. Go on, then. You started off.
So, if you must. So the prologue, for trivia fans, features the little blonde girl from Bloody Birthday, Elizabeth Hoy.
Yeah.
Has a key role in that. She's an evil little devil, isn't she? So she's the little blonde girl in this too, funnily enough. And like so many of these slasher films, including Prom Night, which we mentioned 2 seconds ago, and of course Pieces, which maybe this film comes closer to the most.
That's what I would have said. I would have said the Pieces.
It's on that kind of scale.
Yeah.
Like with a lot of these things, it opens with some horrible stuff that happened in the childhood, in this case of the heroine, Barbie Benton. And basically, as a young girl, Barbie Benton, played by Elizabeth Hoy, was awful. There she is, laughing away at a Valentine's Day card from floppy-haired Harold, who's a bit weird. He's so weird that the film cuts to a close-up of him literally seething at the window because she tears it up in front of his face.
He's like an old man leaning over the fence, kicks a ball into his favourite tulips.
When I grow up.
That ball comes over his fence one more time.
So there she is with her. Is her brother, right? Is it her brother in the opening section? She's with some other boy.
I don't know if it's her brother or whether it's just a friend. It doesn't really say, other than no, it must be a friend, because she says something like, "Look at this cake that my mum's made," which would be a bit weird for her to say if it's.
Yeah, of course,
if it's her brother. Look what my mum made and your mum didn't. Not your mum. You're my step brother, not my actual brother.
Yes, and what I like, setting up the tone of the whole of X-Ray, actually, where it's ridiculous in a great way. To cut the cake, she uses what appears to be a machete. This massive knife.
I thought that when she goes into the drawer. I always think this because I quite a while ago since I watched this film, but I remember her going into the drawer and when she got it out, and I thought, Christ, that nice big. What the hell is she planning on chopping up? Oh yeah,
bigger than she is.
Yeah, the little cake she's going to cut up.
I'll just cut the cake.
and
fancy a scone
and half the table.
So she does that, but of course Harold's watching. And cut to basically her friend David hanging on the coat rack because Harold's gone nuts and has killed him off.
Yeah,
and
I found a good thing about that coat hanging thingy. Must be really, really sturdy and really heavy at the base, because how the hell is it staying stood up with that kid hanging on it on one side?
Impressive. Yeah, because all the coat racks I've ever had, you put one single light jacket
on it. Falls over.
We're going to have to use something else, love.
He must be lighter than a dust bunny.
Actually, I might write to them and ask where they got the coat rack from, because I could do with one on the landing where we got some space there, yeah?
Yeah, why not?
Put my hoodies on there. Anyway, 19 years later.
19 years later, yes.
It's Valentine's Day again.
Yeah, Barbie Benton's turning up. Well,
Barbie Benton.
She's first coming out of her workplace, which is then she's met by her daughter and her ex-husband, Grr, who says things like, "I haven't got time for her today." And that's about it. That's about the nasty thing he says. And then she goes, "God, you're an asshole," basically in the car. Says, I can't deal with it because I got stuff to do. I got a checkup to go to. She goes off with her. I'm presuming it's her new fella to the hospital.
Yeah, it's her new fiance, isn't it? She's already moved on.
And we don't see anything about her daughter and her ex-husband for quite some time. In fact, they become forgotten about.
Yeah, I mean
until she turns up at the hospital, and then which is when she turns up at the hospital with what you said. I think that's right. Anyway, is her new fiance who goes, "Hang on a minute, is this that hospital where that person completely batshit mental a couple of months ago?
There was some trouble last year."
Yeah. "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about," she pretty much says, and ends up going in willy-nilly, all nice and happy and jolly. Oh, maybe she should have listened.
Because it's the weirdest hospital in the world. Like, just her journey, which I think takes up half the film, the route that she takes to get to her routine checkup is full of weirdos. You know, the mad guy you see in the window with a surgical mask, the creepy staring janitor guy, the drunk in the lift that you think is a dead guy with blood next to him, but actually he's just fell asleep while he's eating a burger, the ketchup dripped on the floor.
Yep.
There's the people in gas masks that she
can't use this floor, we're fumigating.
Get over here. There's a creepy old guy on a Zimmer frame that just is hanging around for no apparent reason.
There's loads of them. It's a bit there. I would say, I think this is all the patients that's got kicked out from the place in Don't Look in the Basement. I think they've all been kicked out of that hospital and been pushed into this one because it's the same sort of batshit mental people that was in that hospital.
Yeah,
it's hanging around for no particular reason.
It's not it's not an NHS hospital, is it? It's clearly some real problems here.
Yeah.
Hang on a minute, it is an NHS hospital. Yeah,
but people waiting around in the rooms waiting for the doctor who potentially will eventually turn up. I'll only be half an hour. Okay.
Not enough beds. People dying in the hallways. This is
6 hours later.
Unrelated to the NHS. Wow. Yeah. Hang on a minute. This is a documentary.
But yeah, so as Stephen said, there is quite a few. They are bonkers type peoples, and you could consider a lot of them as red herrings. But I would say it's pretty obvious who the killer is from the get-go as soon as you meet the guy. Because he's a bit too,
not quite the ticket.
Yeah, there's something not quite right about him, as opposed to the leery doctor who later in the film goes, "I want you to get behind there.
Yeah,
take off your clothes."
This is
slowly.
This is the movie where Barbie Benton has a very thorough routine checkup, which means she has her blood pressure taken while she's just wearing her knickers.
Yeah, it's like, because it's very that film noir thing where you got the lights at specific angles, so you get the silhouette of it. So you get her complete silhouette, complete with bosom shot of her getting naked. And it's like he's just standing there going, "Huh," and then the other doctor walks in and he's like, "Something wrong with this?"
There is that, yeah, absolutely. And the guy is Dr. Saxon, I think. That says, well, a checkup is never just a simple formality. Now remove your clothes. Yeah, but I just need this to get medical insurance at my new job.
Yeah, that's all she wanted for. It's basically a quick come in. It's probably basically blood pressure, and that would probably be about it. And off you go. No, she's now stuck there after having an X-ray, which is the thing mentioned in the title of the film.
Oh, yeah.
Which gets her stuck there because this X-ray that she's had shows that, well, it kind of looks like she must have got hit by a truck or something, because her intestines and everything are all mixed up and all the bones are pretty much shattered. Yet none of them are looking at it going, "Hang on a minute, maybe we've got the wrong X-rays here." That person's standing up pretty well for some of these bones are very, very brittle.
It's like that, isn't it? It's like, well, actually, looking at this, you died 3 months ago.
Yes, and this is obviously a male skeleton I'm looking at as opposed to a female's. But okay, we'll carry on anyway.
And I suppose, as crazy as this is, and obviously it's just an excuse to get old Barbie Benton naked.
Yep.
There is a degree of it like with a lot of these hospital horror movies, where it is still playing on all of our kind of cringy fears of routine medical things. Like there's close-ups of them taking blood from her and stuff, which are actually quite horrible to watch if anybody doesn't like that kind of thing happening to them. So we can at least relate to some of it. Of course, we're not usually almost naked when we're having blood taken, sadly.
Well, I've never. I mean, other than like have an operation or something. Obviously, you're in their sexy gowns that they give you.
Yeah.
But normally, when you're having a blood test, it's a case of roll your sleeve up, not hey, do you mind dropping your trousers as well? What?
No problem.
You're not taking blood. That's not where you take blood from. It is now.
Well, I'm in the best place. They're the professionals.
They know what they're doing. I didn't go to medical school, so well.
It's brilliant. I think that stuff's actually cool. I watched the interview with Bose Davidson, the director, on the very good 88 Films Blu-ray that came out of this movie. And there is a sense from what he says that obviously he came from comedies, but there is a sense that he was deliberately doing things over the top and that some of it is meant to be funny.
Yes.
At least that's what he says. I mean, I presume he's telling the truth. And it does kind of make sense that it's so over the top that, you assume it's kind of partly meant to be a parody of this kind of stuff. I'm just not sure.
I didn't really see it as a parody type thing, but after listening to that interview that you said, I kind of looking at it on the outside, you kind of, actually, maybe it is then, because I was watching it as a straight-laced horror movie.
Yeah. Just
with a lot of plot holes in it. Like there's a bit where Barbie Benton's fiance comes in and they're about to walk out of the hospital with her because she doesn't want to stay there any longer. And they bump into the doctor that's taken all her blood tests and everything. And he gets told to sit outside the doctor's office. Bear in mind, he hasn't been told who this doctor's name is. I thought I missed it, so I rewound it to see if they mentioned the doctor's name. He doesn't mention the doctor's name at all. So he gets told to sit outside this doctor's office. He has no idea who he is, and he just happens to find the correct office to sit outside. There's loads of little plot holes like that all the way through the film.
Yeah, absolutely. I presume it was not taken that seriously. I suppose was. Yes, continue.
There's another bit where there's the coloured woman doing her like medical test type thing, typing up some reports or something, and the guy who's actually the killer, he leans out from a door, puts his hand around it, and of course somebody else comes through the door, so he shuts the door. But next time you see him, he's behind another door which he can't have physically possibly got behind without walking past her and her seeing him there, because he turns up behind her. But the first time you see it, it's a door that's right up in front of them. So I don't know.
It's mad. Yeah, there's a few moments like that. There's the moment where Barbie Benton, this is kind of towards the end really, where she's running through the corridors looking for someone to help. She runs into a kind of hilarious scenario with three people in, I guess it's the Burns ward, because they're all, there's a kind of slapstick sequence in the Burns ward.
Yeah, it was running me like one of those like Carry On Doctor movies or something.
and the whole thing, the big horror scenes, have the most over-the-top mental slasher score of all time, which is this kind of Omen-style chanting Jerry Goldsmith Ave Satani thing that plays like mental during the horror scenes. So maybe this was kind of partly intended as a parody, which makes a lot more sense. And it's got the usual jokes, like on the tannoy in the hospital, they're saying things like, Dr. Carpenter, please report to the front desk, please. Dr. Carpenter. Hang on a minute. I
don't think he works in this hospital.
He's too busy getting stoned. He's watching the wrestling.
Yeah.
But that makes a lot of sense. But either way, it's a great deal of fun.
I've quite enjoyed it because I haven't watched it for quite some time. So it was like getting back to rewatching it was pretty entertaining. I don't know if you watched it with the audio commentary, because I watched it.
No.
I watched it with just as it is, and then I watched the audio commentary one, and I was like, I quite enjoyed the. I think it's Callum Waddell's doing it. Who's the other person doing it? Callum Waddell and Justin Kurzweil is the author of that Teenage Wasteland book.
Nice.
But yeah, they don't really say much about the movie as in itself, other than a few things, but they basically go into more in depth about like hospital horror movies and stuff like that. So of course Halloween 2 comes up, and they talk a lot about canon films because that was what this film was. But yeah, it's quite an interesting audio commentary worth listening to.
Sure.
But as for the movie itself, they don't really say much about it other than the poster to the film is kind of, well, it kind of implies a strange hospital where, because the artwork to the film is a woman laid out on one of those beds in a bikini while a doctor is about to do surgery on her. I don't know many hospitals that people end up turning in bikinis in. You get the sexy gown, you don't get the sexy bikini type thing. But as we know, the film is basically Barbie Benson was hired to basically turn up and take her clothes off. So
absolutely. I mean, she doesn't have an awful lot to do generally, so it's hard to tell whether she's capable of being an actress. But she does it. She turns up. She runs away. She hits the killer with a big pipe at the end and sets fire to him. She doesn't have an awful lot of character to play with, really. Not really. No, there isn't. She doesn't really. There's a lot to her in terms of backstory, where you just know that she has a kid who sporadically we get scenes of every now and again. Here's dad not doing anything. Oh look, dad's being irresponsible, left her on her own. That's just it. I mean, she's just reacting, and the movie's so bizarre anyway. So, like we said, even her journey into the hospital is mental with all the stuff that's going on in the lift. So she's just really there to react to whatever weird stuff happens next. So in that sense, she does what she can, I suppose. It's not your typical slasher movie. It's more like a dream sequence kind of thing, more of a nightmare, I suppose. You're not entirely sure if she's actually going through all this, or whether it's just she's actually in hospital already and then she's having a nightmare or something. Because that's basically what comes. Because like the three old biddies who randomly turn up every now and again. Hang on a minute, you couldn't even move 5 seconds ago. How come you managed to get Oya to this top floor where she is? That's the craziest bit of the whole film, isn't it? This basically the cast of Macbeth. Yes. Sharing a room. And talking about her being rotten and decaying on the inside. That's really mental. She's beautiful on the outside, but inside she's rotten. She's rotten. All right, Christ. Hubble, bubble, toilet, trouble. Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe part of it was intended to be, like you said, the nightmare of someone that's, like a lot of us, really scared of going into hospitals and not coming out again. So there's probably a really good, serious movie in here, but instead it's this mad slasher film, which has just got these random things in it that don't really make sense. Most of them are meant to be red herrings, I guess. Oh, there's a lot of red herrings. There's a massive amount of red herrings. And the amount of, is it a jump scare? No, because there's like the bit with the janitor who stumbled across that. He's taken up some like old test dummy things for hospitals to use. And he takes these bodies up to the floor that's being fumigated, which apparently nobody else knows about, because everybody that turns up there goes, oh, the floor is being fumigated. Surely there should be a notice about that being up somewhere, but hey ho. But he turns up, blood. It looks like blood dripping on the floor. Here comes your first jump scare with him. Oh no, it's just a random tin of paint that's been dripping on the floor. Oh, the paint. Pick it up. Oh, I put it in this. Another jump scare. There's actually somebody in it this time. Jump scare. Oh, and now he's dead. It's like 5 jump scares in the space of 2 minutes. It's mad, isn't it? It's absolutely crazy. Yeah. I mean, at the heart of it, there is a kind of fairly creepy killer. There's some creepy whispery moments where he says, oh, can you touch her in all their secret places? And there's some spooky stuff there, but it is lost in this just total throw everything into the pot. 300 red herrings, 26 maybe killers, one fairly obvious, as you said, killer. Yep. And then the eventual reveal, and he's literally after her heart because it's Valentine, so I suppose it had to be. Yeah. But there is a really good full body burn. I really miss full body burns that are not CGI enhanced these days. Well, you say a full body burn. It's a full body burn. Someone gets caught on fire, of course, the stunt guy's there, and then we'll throw a mannequin off the roof. Yeah, they absolutely cut the mannequin. What's that? Is it Cannibal Ferox or something like that? Where they have a
somebody jumps out of a window or something, and then when the body hits the floor, an arm breaks off, so you can obviously see it's a mannequin. It's not that bad of a mannequin. This one actually hits the floor and stays like that. It's not like, oh look, the crash test dummies fell apart kind of.
It's fairly light on gore, isn't it? I mean, it's largely the kind of slasher film where I suppose a lot of the slasher films of the early 80s are like this, because not all of them had somebody like Tom Savini in charge of the effects, but a lot of the kills are shot of the knife and then some blood splashing on the curtain or something. Although there is a bone saw bit, there's an axe in the head, severed head in a cake box from kind of thing.
Yeah, there's that, and there's the guy, the janitor, who gets his face put into that sink full of acid that somebody just happened to be irresponsibly leaving in the sink.
Careless. In this hospital, that's not a surprise.
No, not really. So, but yeah, this hospital has hardly anybody. There's a couple of nurses that randomly turn up every now and again, and the occasional doctor that walks by, but it's mainly that leery doctor and the other doctor who may or may not be the killer. He is the killer. It's blatantly obvious.
It's Harry, not Harold. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's pretty sparsely stuffed. But then so is Halloween 2. You know, Halloween 2 is this weird hospital like you've never seen before, where the staff largely vanish.
Mad 15 minutes, is it, at the beginning part of it? And then it's just like, hang on a minute. Have they security shut down this whole area so it's just her on this side? Or
Where'd
what?
everyone go? Why are the lights off? Yeah, it's really strange.
But it is worth watching. It's definitely one. I wouldn't say it's like, if you used to pick 10 sort of more obscure horror slasher films from the 80s, you'd put this up there. But I'd definitely say it's one you should check out.
Yeah. It sure is.
What would you say?
Yeah, I think so. It's easy to remember all the slasher films with great nostalgia, but not all of them are as much fun as this one. And it's up there in terms of entertainment value. It's got all the cliches, the red herrings, the heavy breathing, the point of view. But the heavy breathing's mental as well. It's not just your average.
It's way over the top.
Yes. He's in the right place with that asthma. It's totally mad. It's probably the most over the top of the straight slash. If we take this as a straight slasher film, whether he intended it as half a parody or not, we have to kind of assume most of it's meant to be sort of serious, because it's not wacko. It's not one of the actual Student Bodies. It's not like a total spoof. And they were already out there from 1980 onwards. Mm-hmm. But if we take it as a serious slasher film, it's possibly in like the top few mental ones, like top few really funny ones. Later on, actually only about 1982, I think it is, when Slumber Party Massacre comes along, and that's very kind of nudge, we're not taking this seriously. Yes. But for when this came out, most of them were intended to be serious. And if it's part of them, then it's kind of along with Pieces, which I think seems like it's being taken seriously.
Yeah.
Strangely. Along with Pieces, it's one of the most batshit mad, as you said, of the original run. And for that reason, more so than some of the more serious ones, it holds up as being a really, really good, fun film.
Yeah, it's well shot. There is no no cheap shot. There's a shot that I really like, which is the bit where the killer runs down the hallway with a big sheet in his hand. I don't know why he's carrying a big sheet like this, but he runs down the whole hallway to cover up this nurse who's, I don't know if she's scared of the sheet or what it is, but she petrified of this guy who's holding a sheet at the bottom end of the corridor. And then when he starts running, she screams her head off. Maybe is he using Daz instead of bulb? Is there a stain on the sheet that she's scared of? I don't know.
Yeah. There's some really good moments. It's shot by the guy that filmed Tourist Trap, Nicholas van Hellenberg, which is a really good looking late 70s film. So it's a proper looking film. Yeah, that's him. Yeah. And it's got a quite good climax. The stuff with her and the killer at the end, which is the usual extended fight to the death, is actually quite well done. So
yeah, you get that, and then the film ends with her just casually coming out of the hospital, as to say, well, What doesn't happen in a hospital?
Presumably, now off to my routine checkup at the opticians.
Yes. Oh, I hope that doesn't go as bad as this one. Yeah.
What are the chances?
But yeah, I thought it was quite interesting. It's good to rewatch it, and of course, like a lot of films, if you haven't watched them in a while, you see things that you didn't spot before. So yeah, definitely one to at least watch once if you, I don't know, if you're looking for something slightly more obscure out of the main sort of slasher genre, I suppose.
For sure.
Unless you can think of any others, probably in this vein, maybe a little bit more of the obscure end. Humongous, maybe.
Humongous is quite a fun one because it's by the director of Prom Night, actually, but it's much less well known and has only ever been available in kind of quite dark looking videos and DVDs. It's kind of in the sort of rural slasher kind of subgenre. There's a whole bunch of them.
I quite like Humongous. It's definitely one I think 88 Films should at least look at potentially putting out, or Arrow, but you know, got to be some more slasher films to put in the 88 film section. You know, that one that a lot of people complain about and say, you know, such and such isn't really a slasher film, but then you could say that about a lot of things. So you can't, you know, what do you classify as a horror or a thriller film? It's up to really the person. It's what you're scared of.
Oh, completely. Yeah, of course. And slasher movie as a term gets overused. Loads of, you know, a lot of critics, a lot of mainstream critics would use the term slasher movie if they didn't like something because they saw slasher movie as being a kind of derogatory term.
It's lower than porn.
Video nasty, or it makes no sense. Video nasty never made any sense. What do you mean? It's actually a nasty video? What, a nasty tape? Look at it. It's being made. It's blowing raspberries at me. That's
got fingerprints all over it.
Nasty. None of it makes any. Torture porn makes no sense. What you mean? I'm meant to get off on it?
Well, it's like Suspiria, isn't it? Some people say it's a giallo, and some people say it's not. Well, it has giallo elements in it, but is it really a giallo? Well, I don't know.
Sure. Does it matter? Exactly. It's by a famed director of giallo, so of course it's going to have kind of echoes of his signature stuff. These labels, man. The torture porn one is the one that bothers me the most. I mean, first of all, why does porn have to be a bad thing?
Stephen.
And second of all, the torture in these movies, of course, is secondary to the torture carried out in real life by our good friends, the government.
And on that cheery note, we will end our mini review of X-Ray for our Retro Rewind, which I imagine we will once again come across another slasher film somewhere it's one of Stephen's favourite sort of subgenres of horror, so we will definitely be doing a slasher film somewhere along the line again.
Yes. Thanks very much.
But it's in what decade though? Which decade should we go? 70s, 80s? There's loads of times, but should we go late past the 70s, any time in the 80s, or what are the, obviously most of them are like teen horror slasher films in the 90s, but I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But as this X-Ray was all about love and things like that, and love going completely wrong, if it's even more a bit of a surreal kind of way, we're now going to talk about Valentine horror movies, films that have either got an obvious Valentine's theme to it, so like My Bloody Valentine, which is pretty obvious it's about Valentine's, or slightly more obscure ones, which it's actually surprising. I was looking at it, I didn't find as many as I thought it was going to find. There's the obvious, X-Ray, which is also known as Hospital Massacre, which is just spoken about. But the previous one to that was My Bloody Valentine, which obviously you could and ah as whether X-Ray was influenced by it, but I would say it was it was filmed about the same time, but X-Ray was put on the shelf, so of course it got held off for a bit. So when it did come out, of course you're going to get people going, hang on a minute, it's a bit like My Bloody Valentine, isn't it?
Yeah, that was a massive time, wasn't it? And like you said, a lot of them got shelved. Like they made so many of them that I guess the release schedules were really clogged. So some things were delayed for about 2 or 3 years before they came out.
Yeah, and when it did come out, it'd have like something on the poster. This first film starring such and such, and you're like, well, they're a big Hollywood A-lister now. But okay.
Is that Julia Roberts?
Yeah. So My Bloody Valentine was the first Valentine-based horror film that I came across. Was that the first one you come across of?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's the obvious one from 1981, and from Paramount, who had a big hit with picking up Friday the 13th, and then it's an interesting period, isn't it, of horror where the big studios had seen Friday the 13th and Halloween be massive, and all of them, MGM, I think, had He Knows You're Alone, and Paramount did My Bloody Valentine. They were all coming out with these pretty cheap to film slasher movies in the wake to try and make some cash.
And in some cases it worked. Other cases it was, it's a lot of film gambling in films, isn't it? It's a case of just because this film made loads of money that year doesn't necessarily mean the same sort of film's going to make you money for a different company. It's just, obviously you get that thing of, hang on a minute. It's very much like, I don't know, found footage films is always, it's very Blair Witch. But then, of course, that's the main thing that people look at, because found footage was basically kicked off with the Blair Witch film, even though found footage films were done decades before that anyway, Cannibal Holocaust, things like that. But yeah, so My Bloody Valentine was the obvious one. And of course, you got Valentine as well from 2001, starring Angel, Stephen's lover from the 19th.
That's David Boreanaz.
Yes, that's his name. So I thought, see, it's just the way he says it, so you can just tell.
Just gotta have that cold shower.
That film I've only seen a couple of times, and both times it was probably on telly.
Valentine, yeah?
Yeah, Valentine, yeah.
I think, that's an interesting one. I quite like Valentine. It was 2001. It's an interesting one because it's by a guy that really likes horror movies, which is Jamie Blanks, who directed Storm Warning, which is really good, and which I think we mentioned last time.
We did.
And the remake of Long Weekend, which is pretty good as remakes go. And Valentine is part of that post-Scream cycle of slasher movies, although maybe in a good way, actually. It's not smarmy kind of nudge, nudge.
Yeah, there was that. That's the one thing I did like about it is, hey, look, we're in a horror film.
Oh, look at us. We know what's going to happen. Oh, it's the killer that keeps bouncing back from the dead. And the good thing...
suddenly turned into Deputy Dog then. But
it happens all the time. And there, at Valentine, I mean, there's back in the day that I listened to the commentary by Jamie Blanks on Valentine. It's quite interesting because he talks on the commentary about how much he hates the fake scares that he felt forced to include, presumably by the studio, because it was a big-ish Warner Brothers film. And he talks of how much the film's gore had to be toned down. Basically, it was passed uncut by the MPAA, but the studio was really nervous, like a bunch of studios around the time, because it was just after Columbine, where a lot of the horror stuff or the violent stuff was being toned down, not necessarily by the censors, but by the studios that were like, oh, shiza, Columbine's been blamed on the usual stuff, movies, video games, Marilyn Manson, because of course we all know that's the reason. Definitely, that's sorted out. Then next, I'm sure this will never happen again. It's a really honest commentary, and the movie you can kind of tell is compromised, although it has some good things, and it's got that glossy look. It's got big stars, or biggish stars, I suppose. Depends how big you think Denise Richards is these days. It's got
at the time it was quite big, wasn't she? Because
I suppose
this was when is it World's Not Enough? I think that's the Bond film that she was in. She was in, and of course Dave Boreanaz was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So yeah, they are for that time they were big stars, but.
Absolutely. And was she like a nuclear physicist in the James Bond film?
She was called Christmas Jones.
Typecast again.
Yeah, in her little Tomb Raider shorts, which I'm sure most of the male and some of the female people watching it were not particularly bothered about. I know, as somebody who'd only finished secondary school around that time, wasn't particularly bothered about it.
No, I didn't complain about those shorts or anything.
hang on, you didn't finish secondary school around 2000.
Oh, 2000. Let me just work out. Oh God. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anywho.
So yeah, there's good things about Valentine, which gets a kind of bad rap. I still think it's probably a better film than like Scream 3 or Scream 4. It's in the spirit of this stuff we just talked about. Like, it's got the childhood trauma slasher movie prologue with a nerd that's been, the bullies basically pour red punch over him, which is a bit of a nod to Carrie, I guess, at the school dance. He holds a grudge, and then years later, the school friends are being killed off.
Is he an English teacher? Stuff. Does he become an English teacher? The killer?
I think he's a teacher. Yeah, I think so.
Or drama teacher or something. I can't remember what it is, but yeah, something like that. But it is very much a bit like X-Ray. Hang on a minute. I think we know who the killer is.
Very much so. Yeah, and the key character is like the girl that was also kind of outcast at the time, the chubby one, who's grown up and still feels guilty about it. The killer's got quite a good mask, which was by KNB at the time, like the Cupid, the cherub mask, which is quite effective. Loads of red herrings, and the big twist, or kind of the double twist at the end, which is very, as we said, kind of Scooby-Doo and quite guessable. But the ultimate twist involves like a real nod, which Jamie Blanks acknowledged as well in the commentary, to the Bleeder in Alone in the Dark, one of the key 80s slasher films that he was obviously influenced by. So Valentine has got a bunch of stuff that it's got going for it. So, yeah, it's not bad. But in answer to your question, My Bloody Valentine from 1981 is a really, really good one.
Yeah. What about the remake from 2009? Which stars one of the guys from this TV series Supernatural, though I've forgotten what his name is at the moment.
Handsome Jeff.
Nope, that's not his name. But yeah, what did you think of the remake?
Sexy. Yeah, no, I saw the remake in the cinema in 3D.
Ooh, look at you.
There I was with my special glasses on and the 3D ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, actually, I really like the remake. I mean, the remake was... it's good. It was in that weird year, basically the same year you had remakes. It was like going back in time. You'd look at, coming soon. Last House on the Left. Hang on a minute. Piranha, Friday the 13th. What? I think we've done these already. They all came out in about the same year.
Jensen Ackles was his name. The guy. And of course, this stars Jamie King as well. I always liked Jamie King, the blonde-haired girl that was in a lot of stuff in the early 2000s.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's an interesting cast. She's in it. It does a good job, I think. And again, a bit like Valentine, it's not got any of the nudge, postmodern stuff. It's just a straightforward slasher film. And it's probably one of the only films from the 3D revival that actually makes really good use of 3D. Like, it understands 3D. There's some good stuff with deep focus where you see like splintered doors in a kind of cool way, but it understands that 3D is just a gimmick. So you can see Tom Atkins' jaw rolling away at the screen, and bits and pieces of body parts like coming at your face. I really like 3D. My Bloody Valentine remake. It's a good one. It's also got that sequence which I guess you would never be able to do even now, even though this was only 10 years ago or 11 years ago, which is the naked chase scene with the actress who's just shagged Todd Farmer, who wrote the movie and cast himself as a kind of stud that has a lot of sex, and she gets chased while naked from the motel, and it's actually a really good scene. But of course, the fact that she's naked means you'd never get away with it now, because that stuff's bad. You could have a naked man in there, that'd be all right.
So what other ones would you say were obviously Valentine based? Because the ones that I sort of looked up were Pontypool,
yes,
9, which again I've only seen once, and that was probably when it came out. So Lover's Lane from 1999. Have you ever seen that?
Lover's Lane is one of those slasher films. Yep, that's quite a good one. And
My Boyfriend's Back from 1993.
I haven't seen My Boyfriend's Back.
No, neither have I. I just looked it up and that's quite interesting. I remember reading stuff about it, but never actually getting around to watching it. So I looked it up and thought I will try and put that on a list somewhere where hopefully I will one day get around to watching it before a remake comes out, I suppose.
Yeah, that was one of the kind of mainstream horror comedies, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's like a teen romance horror thing, but it's got a great poster of. It's very sort of early 90s poster of a guy in a groom's outfit just popping out the grave with a bunch of flowers in his hand while the girl's leaning over the gravestone. But the poster looks interesting. The trailer looked interesting. Just I've never got around to watching it. So
yeah, it's very much one of those. Lover's Lane is one of those, like with Valentine, around the turn of the century, the 21st century, which was one of the straight kind of slasher movies that came out after Scream. Over here, it was called I'm Still Waiting for You, which a few of them had the names like that, like I Still Know You Did Last Summer. You know, they all had kind of similar names at a certain point. But that one's a real kind of Scooby-Doo-ish red herring. Oh, he's just escaped from the asylum, the anniversary of the old murders kind of thing.
Oh yeah, it's that. Hey, did you hear about such and such? Such and such broke out. Oh, yeah. Oh dear, we better be careful now. You know, we're all going camping. We don't want something to happen.
No, well, like 20 years ago. Yeah.
We'll just leave this letter here with the keys, let him know where we are, and the telephone number in case he gets lost.
It's just that. It's that. Oh, there's something. Oh, what's that? Oh, I'll go and check.
Don't do it. Oh, I'll be fine. I'll be back in a minute. Oh, no.
It's that, and it's also got and there was a few movies around the time, like I think there's one called Head Cheerleader, Dead Cheerleader, which have multiple killers. So it was very much the Scream twist of not just one killer. Lover's Lane has at least 2 hook-wielding nut jobs that are going around, just as, you know, to make things more interesting at the twist. It's not very good, but it was all right. You know, at the time there were so many of these things, and it's also interesting because it's got Anna Faris, who kind of spoofed this type of role when she was in the Scary Movie roles, or movies rather.
And did you mention Pontypool? I mentioned Pontypool, but did you mention anything about it?
Pontypool's really good. Pontypool's set in Valentine's Day in Canada. It's a really standout horror movie. I've seen it only once actually. I need to rewatch it, but
I only watched it once, and that was probably when it came out. I'm not sure if it was. Maybe it was at Fright Fest. Maybe I'm not sure.
I think it was. I don't know if I saw it at Fright Fest, but I'm sure it was probably showing back then, probably on one of the smaller screens.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, though. You know, the idea of it's fantastic. It's about an infection that it's implied is being spread around the world, but initially, at least in the small town, where Stephen McHattie is the late night DJ, whose normal kind of show is gradually taken over by news of weird stuff happening outside, and it's basically an infection spread by language, by the English language, which I think is something, maybe I don't know if it was the 80s Twilight Zone or the original run that did an episode where language is a source of threat. But it's a really interesting one. The whole movie kind of becomes this nihilistic kind of George Romero-ish thing, but most of the horror is suggested rather than being, you know, physical zombies on screen and that kind of stuff.
I've always enjoyed these suggestive kind of horror films.
Yeah.
As opposed to, because now, not all, but a lot of films now, if they have like a monster thing, instead of like leaving it till maybe like halfway through the film or 3/4 of the film towards the end, where you actually get like the full reveal, you see the monster or something within the first 20 minutes. So yeah. That thing that you're supposed to be scared of, or maybe I'll see it soon, want to catch another glimpse of it, you've already seen. So all the thrill bit is suddenly gone. You're just waiting now for that thing to go around killing people.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's the biggest problem I have with things like the Conjuring styles ghost stories, because to me, a ghost story are fairly quiet things. You know, they're all about the build up. Like, there's a reason nothing really supernatural happens in The Exorcist for at least an hour. Yeah. You get the medical tests, which are awful, but fairly kind of everyday stuff. And the Amityville horror, you know, the scariest stuff in the first hour is the little girl talking to a rocking chair, or the money going missing. You know, we've all had that. Oh, the money's gone missing. Wow. And it's only in the kind of last 5 minutes that you got slime dripping from the walls.
Well, that's why I like the Haunting of Hill House TV series, because it could have quite easily went the whole, you know, oh, we're going to go for the obvious jump scares. We're going to show you things straight off the bat. But it is actually holding it back, like the book. It holds it back, and then things are suggested. Potentially, this is what it could be. Okay, things can be explained, but then you start seeing things as it goes through. So
yeah, absolutely. That's the especially for ghost stories, but also generally in horror, the suggestive stuff is usually the most frightening stuff. Don't Look Now is another good one where there's very little that you actually see, but the horror of them losing a child at the start, and then the sense that he's chasing something that is probably going to kill him, which of course does. Really terrifying.
Yeah, which as I said, I prefer that sort of thing. I'd rather have that than straight off. And yeah, there's certain subgenres of horror that you can't help, and you have to kind of have it in your face kind of things. But there's other things a bit like Don't Look Now, would you rather be suggested so you can, everybody's going to watch it and maybe come back with something different and go, oh, well, I had this in my head, what was going on, and then somebody else will say something, oh, actually. So it gives you a bit of a talking point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So did you have any others obvious Valentine's movies?
Well, I've got some kind of horror love stories that we'll get to, but the only other kind of obvious set on Valentine's thing that I can think of, which is borderline horror, is The Picnic at Hanging Rock.
Yeah, I did kind of like, yeah, is it a horror film or is it? Yeah, so I did have that on my list, but then I deleted it.
I'll just scrub that off. Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things that's definitely borderline. I mean, it's a mystery. It's the true events kind of thing.
Yeah, that's why I'm going. It is a real life horror story. So as I was saying earlier, what do you really classify in these genres? It's surely it's up to the person who's watching it. I mean,
entirely, yeah.
Somebody could be watching, like you mentioned earlier, Addams Family. Someone could be terrified of, I don't know, the animation style or something. That's something that scares them, is the terrible animation in something. So that's an extreme version, but everybody's scared of something.
Oh, absolutely. Like, when I met John Pertwee, the actor from Doctor Who, when my parents say I met him when I was about 3 or 4 or something, and I was terrified. He came to Fakenham in Norfolk, which was, in retrospect, amazing that he came to Fakenham. I just thought I'd mention Fakenham there. And apparently I was terrified of him, so I never really got to meet him because he was dressed in his full costume for Wurzel Gummidge, which was the series he did after Doctor Who.
Yeah. So what did he come there for? Was it like opening or something, or was they filming in the area or something?
Oh, I think it was just as a special guest because it was at the race course. So Fakenham, as possibly slightly boring as it is, does have a race course where they, have bona fide horse racing. So he was there, I guess, as a special guest, maybe for opening something. I think the race course was already open, but he was there anyway.
It wasn't racing.
He wasn't on a horse.
It wasn't
too tall.
I was about to say it wasn't Riding Sally, but that's a completely different program.
Good God. Oh, I've seen those videos. They're horrifying. Yeah. So I was terrified, even though I really enjoyed Wurzel Gummidge at a very young age. The fact that this, I think John Pertwee was 6'5". He was extremely tall. I'm not sure how tall he was. But my parents tell a story of how I was too terrified of him. So the excitement of meeting this quite famous actor who played Doctor Who was totally ruined because I was possibly wetting myself.
Wow.
So,
did you watch?
This was last year. Oh, sorry.
Did you watch the new one that was on BBC One around Christmas time?
Yeah, well, kind of. It was that annoying thing where, because it was Christmas, I was only at best half watching it around someone else's house, so my parents' house. So I didn't really appreciate it. It looked okay. I mean, I wasn't quite sure because it was one of those things where everybody was talking at the same time. So I was going, I'm not quite sure about this.
Yeah, well, I didn't get around to watch it. It's the scene. All I saw was an image of it. My sister going, "There's a new Wurzel Gummidge out," and I was like, yeah, "Well, maybe I'll watch it." I don't know. I never did. So
see how I feel.
Yeah, but yeah, Picnic at Hanging Rock is, like you said, it is a horror film to some, but like a lot of things. So it was on my list, but then it got deleted. But there isn't a lot, surprisingly, of obvious based on Valentine's Day horror movies.
No, I think Picnic probably qualifies just because it's all about dread and it's all about this kind of unseen, possibly supernatural presence. But Yeah, and it's got Mrs. Mangle from Neighbours as the teacher that goes missing. That's pretty scary.
Well, yeah, I suppose so. But yeah, so we jump in now into the ones that are love based, so not really set on Valentine's Day, but got a love influence or like a subplot into it. So what I've done is I've done a couple, and Steve's done a couple, and well, Steve's probably got more written down than I have. But the other one, I'll just go quick this through mine. Mine was Necromantic from 1987. That's an obvious love story for a man that's in love with something that maybe you should be in love with. But hey, who's to judge? Everybody's in love with something. Pin from 1988. Which I think is a great movie, and I'm still surprised that there isn't that many people that still haven't seen it. It has got a cult following, but if you talk to people about it, they're like, I've never watched that. So when I do eventually watch it, that was great. Why is it not so, more well known? But I don't know.
Pin's really good, isn't it? Yeah, Pin was one of those VHS things that I watched growing up and always thought it was creepy, and I went back to it from, I don't know what re-release it had recently, but recently-ish.
Was it Arrow that released it, I think?
Possibly, yeah.
But yeah, it is a creepy film. But it's got
really good.
It's got a love story. A guy that's, well, can't say too much about it because obviously it's just got a bit of a twist in it. But it's basically a guy who's in love with somebody, but he goes to extreme measures to get to that person. Maybe a little too extreme, perhaps.
Yeah.
That's basically the easy way to say it, because also we can't say too much about it because of the twist that's in the film.
Yeah.
And the only obvious one I put there was Spring from 2014.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Which, again, I've only seen once. So I have no recollection really of it, because it's probably one of them ones I've watched, and I was probably maybe half watching because I was probably doing something at the same time.
Oh, not that, right?
No, I think it was probably on the horror channel. I was like, oh, what's this? And sat there watching it. But I don't think I've actually got around to physically watching the whole movie yet. But when I looked it up, it has a love story horror thing going on in it. So it was an obvious one to put on the list. But yeah, I'm sure you've potentially got a lot more, because there is a lot. It depends on how far you want to go back with how, horror and love, because you could say Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
So, and all the Count Dracula movies.
Sure, yeah. And there's always those things, isn't there? Like, it seemed like there was a time, especially, or maybe after the big Coppola Dracula of the early 90s, Bram Stoker's Dracula, they called it. There was a time where they brought back the famous monsters like Dracula, and when you listen to the interviews on the set, it was always, oh yeah, this is a love story more than a horror movie. Oh, in that case, well, bugger off then. I'll go and watch the horror version with Christopher Lee. Oh yeah, this is more about the relationship. What? Yeah, there's a whole bunch
being ripped out and boobs and things. Yeah, what the hell?
It's not a horror film. It's a love story, a dark love story. And indeed, I suppose the result of all that kind of stuff that was big in the 90s, you got a whole section in every bookshop which is called paranormal romance, which is vampire stories with a bit of shagging.
Yeah.
So I've stayed away from those, and you could obviously, there's some really good ones. And like you said, Bride of Frankenstein is a great film, which is all about that kind of strange relationship that never happens.
Reanimator was another one. Oh, well, Bride of Reanimator was one I was going to put in as well. But
yeah, which is great.
So yeah, there is those sort of ones, but it's trying to work out how far do you really go with a love thing. Yeah.
Well, I jotted down a few. I mean, there's what I consider to be really, really good horror films that are at heart a love story. One is actually the David Cronenberg version of The Fly.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
which is brilliant. I mean, it's when I watched it again back in the VHS days, it was kind of some benchmark of gore effects in a big film. It's like, jeepers creep, really? Unbelievable stuff in The Fly in terms of gruesome gore and stuff. But ultimately, The Fly, as Cronenberg made it, it's a remake, of course, of the really good 50s monster movie, which is a bit more of a monster movie than the 80s version is. But it's really a movie about kind of how awful it is to watch one of your loved ones, or your loved one, die of some horrible disease, and literally have bits of his body falling off throughout the film. It's got the tragic ending where, of course, Gina Davis has to basically blast him away when he's fully transformed into a fly. But most of the movie is typical of David Cronenberg stuff, is kind of essentially we're watching someone rot and die throughout the film, and there's nothing we can do about it. And Gina Davis is in love with him and has to kill him.
That's a good thing. Did you like the second one?
Yeah, I really like the second one. The second one, I mean, it's ridiculous to compare it to the first one, but the second one is really good in its own right. Yeah, absolutely. And has some extraordinary practical gore effects as well.
That's why I like it. I like the dog and everything that was in it in the second one. Great special effects.
Really good special effects. Yeah, The Fly 2 gets a bad rap, but because it's following such a great film, but it's really good, and it's surely worthy of some kind of all bells and whistles Blu-ray release at some stage over here. But The Fly is high up there because it's genuinely moving and it's really gruesome. Another one which I suppose is similar to The Fly in terms of the idea of watching your beloved kind of decompose or deteriorate is Return of the Living Dead 3.
Oh, yes. Who can forget Julia? Is that her name?
Julie?
Julie.
Yeah.
Julia, whichever one it is, from Return of the Living Dead 3, as her transformation throughout the film into slight rock chick into, oh my god, she's gone full death metal.
Yeah, it's exactly that, isn't it? Yeah. Return of the Living Dead 3 is a cracking film. I mean, it's unique in that franchise because the first two are horror comedies, very playful. Although actually the first one gets pretty serious at the end.
Yeah.
You couldn't really get any more serious than the end of the first Return of the Living Dead.
Won't say because somebody might not have seen it, but let's just say kaboom.
Yeah, Jesus. Which is one of the reasons the first one is so good, is that it goes, really? But the third one is really serious. So, and the second one is total comedy, but the third one is Brian Usner kind of joining the series, just really using the title and is it the trioxin gas?
Yeah, that's all it really is. It's just that. It's more of a in the name thing, which is basically what Return of the Living Dead 4 and 5 is really.
Yes.
Just in name.
Sure. It's one of those.
Yeah, but Stephen really likes Return of the Living Dead 4 and 5, as you can tell if you read his reviews of them in Franchise Corner on the website.
Good God. Years. But part three is your usual boy meets girl, girl dies horribly in, I think it's a motorcycle crash.
Yeah.
And boy revives her with trioxin gas. And
like you do.
And she's still really pretty and everything. But then girl, unfortunately, because she's dead, she has to mutilate herself to take away the pain of being dead and eat people's brains to keep existing. And it's true events as well. And Mindy Clark.
Valentine's Day.
Yeah. Oh, you should all watch it together. Mindy Clark is really good. I mean, it's one of the most, I suppose it's one of the most, the 90s was a bit rubbish in terms of new horror movie icons and stuff.
Yeah.
And it took Scream to revive the genre, but I don't really think it revived it. It just created a whole subgenre that came back for a couple of years. But Return of the Living Dead 3 really has an iconic 90s character, which is Mindy Clark's kind of awkwardly sexy, stroke terrifying, stroke tragic zombie with the body piercing and stuff, which at the time body piercing wasn't really that much of a thing. I mean, we'd represented it with things like Hellraiser and stuff, but it hadn't crossed over into something that you saw people on the street with as much, especially in Faking them.
Mindy Clark's character towards the end of Return of the Dead 3 is that weird thing as a male that you'll get an erection, but are you turned on by the way she is, or is it the way that she's doing certain things? So are you turned on by her sexy attire, or is it the whole mutilating thing? It makes things a little awkward sometimes.
Yeah, and she's dead, of course.
Oh, that's just a pretty normal thing. So.
Actually, yeah, there's the old stirrings back again.
Yeah, it's romantic.
It's a really well done. It's a really well done film. And it does have the tragic, it doesn't cop out. It has the tragic ending that you would kind of think it was going to lead up to. Yeah, and she's great. She was in a couple of kind of low budget-ish exploitation films. She was in Return to Two Moon Junction, and then later on she became the not that I watched it, of course. Well, I may have watched all 4 seasons of it, but she became the kind of evil stepmother in the teenage soap opera, The OC.
No, I never watched that. And never will.
I may have watched it accidentally for 4 years, missing no episodes.
This is what Stephen says. But Stephen was, when I used to go round Stephen's his old property, it was always on display next to the DVD player, and I was like, "Who's that?" And he always used to say, "That's his missus's. This is his." Hang on a minute. That's the story he's going with. I'll just leave him do it. It's fine, whatever.
Each to his own.
Whatever floats your boat, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I'd just like to mention as well that the Gilmore Girls was also hers as well.
And Dawson's Creek.
Yeah, completely someone else's, not mine. Pacey forever. Is
that Twilight tattoo you got on your ass? Or
you saw that? Oh, of course you've seen that. No worries. So yeah, Return of the Living Dead 3 is it's well worth checking out, and if you get a chance,
that is not the movie.
And the thing is, though, when she gets to the OC, not wishing to harp on about it, but she's no longer Mindy Clark. She's got all serious. She's called Melinda Clark. You see, career had evolved.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to put the past behind her.
Well, it's too late. All those scars and everything showing, so can't do a lot.
She was beautiful, though, wasn't it? Oh, what a great image that was.
Yeah, there was a lot of main horror icon type things she thought, but like 90s kind of thing. So there was her, Candyman. I suppose you could potentially say Hellraiser people, but that was 80s really when they first kicked off.
Yeah. Ghostface, yeah. There's very little, isn't there? Everything else was kind of secondhand, like Freddy came back for New Nightmare.
Yeah.
They tried new things with the Cenobites that didn't always work, but sometimes were okay.
I can't really think of it. Pumpkinhead, but that was...
He was a holdover from the 80s as well. It's quite a barren period. I mean, you meant Candyman, of course, is also part of this cycle of what are horror movie love stories. Candyman is a very attractive, charismatic, romantic, and tragic figure as well, isn't he?
He is. That's also one of my favourite 90s horror movies. It's got a great soundtrack to it.
Beautiful. Well, the soundtrack is part of that sense of kind of weird romance, isn't it? The Philip Glass music is not really that menacing most of the time, although there's always that underlying sense of threat, but it's this kind of music box theme as well, but there's this kind of romantic sweep to it. And the whole thing with Candyman is him saying things like, "It was always you, Helen." He's wanting Helen, not necessarily to kill her, but he's in love with her. And it's Tony Todd in 1992, so who wouldn't go along with that and just, be right in there with him straight away?
I did hear a rumor recently, I don't know if it's actually going to happen, but potentially he might actually be in this Candyman remake, whether it's actually as Candyman or just a kind of his usual tidbit now, as it is nowadays, turn it for 2 minutes. "Hi, I'm Candyman," disappear.
I hope so. I vaguely remember checking the always accurate Internet Movie Database, and at some stage, I haven't checked it lately, but at some stage he was in the cast list with some character name that didn't make any kind of familiarity, but I'm sure he'll be in there somewhere. And I think the remake has great potential. Or remake, whatever it is, sequel, reboot.
Reimagining. Yeah. It's something.
Hopefully not retard, which of course some of them have been.
Yes. So, any other ones you got on your?
Yeah, sure, man. Yeah, a few others.
Yeah, there was quite a few I was going to write down, but it's kind of like but how far do you go, really?
Oh, all the way, baby.
Don't just stop there. Go all the way.
Yeah, no half measures for me. I know you had to finish yourself off that time, but that was just a mistake. I was drunk. Yep. I mean, there's a couple of lower budget things that I'll mention, but one from recent years which I really liked, and unusually I consider it a horror film, unusually for the horror genre, it won the Oscar for Best Movie, is The Shape of Water. Not The English Patient. Sorry, hello. The Shape of Water, which is wonderful.
Creature from the Black Lagoon, basically.
Yeah, the great thing about this is basically, I mean, it's Guillermo del Toro, who is one of those filmmakers that clearly is a huge fan of horror and monsters, especially, and he's crossed over into mainstream filmmaking from his own country, his own homeland, where he was making stuff like The Devil's Backbone, very, very good films. And he's crossed over into Hollywood, and The Shape of Water is basically, the idea is that the creature from the Black Lagoon gets the girl.
Mm-hmm.
That's the plot. And
Yep.
the movie is this kind of alternatively gruesome and very romantic kind of fairy tale thing, which doesn't shy away from graphic gore. It's got a really great villain played by Michael Shannon, who is fantastic in everything. And Doug Jones is playing the modern day version of what is essentially the Gill Man.
Yep.
It's a really, really strong film. And whereas the Creature from the Black Lagoon series is very much about how the creature is victimized, this one kind of gives him a happy finish of sorts. And I really like The Shape of Water. I was really pleased when it did so well as it did.
Talking of Del Toro, is there any films in his filmography that he's actually directed, not like produced or anything, but his films that he's directed? Is there any of those that you've gone, actually, I'm not a big fan of that? Because for me, he hasn't put a step wrong yet in the director's chair.
No, not at all, actually. Of the same thinking. And not all of them are well received in terms of critically. Not that means anything, really, but I know Crimson Peak wasn't that well received, but I really loved it.
Maybe we should get the right film, not Crimson Tide. Just completely
Crimson Tide. That submarine stuff was weird. And from memory, Pacific Rim, I mean, wasn't particularly loved, but it's actually exactly what it sets out to do. It's the kaiju thing.
Yeah, monsters battling robots. So that's
that's just it. I mean, I may have made it up, but I'm sure that a lot of the reviews were, this is ridiculous. Well, yeah, but hang on.
This is ridiculous. But have you seen Transformers?
It's amazing to me that he would be given a fortune of money to make like a love letter to that kind of thing, which he obviously adores. But that's a fantastic thing. The film nerds have always been a big part of Hollywood. Spielberg and George Lucas are just kind of film nerds that got millions of dollars to play with. And he's now one of those as well, and he does it really well. So Crimson Peak, I thought, was a lovely kind of tribute to gothic horror stuff. And that one, I suppose, has its own kind of romantic subplot and stuff, but it's got some really cool sets and production design and some, again, as with all of his films, some really kind of startling gore effects.
Yes, but it's definitely worth watching, even if I don't know, maybe you've only looked at the trailers or whatever and thought, hang on a minute, it's like a real soppy love story with a monster just to try and bring in a different audience. But
yeah,
it's not just that. It's that and more. So
absolutely, yeah. Well, God bless him. A couple more. In fact, I think I've got 3 more. I mean, I toyed with the idea for a while of a film that I really like, Let the Right One In, which I suppose you could class as a kind of adolescent love story between these two characters. Maybe.
I did consider that one, but it's kind of like, well, it's kind of like in the vampire area, so love and vampires basically go together anyway. So if we did that, we'd be here all day.
Oh, that is true. Yeah. What about Twilight? I don't know if anyone's heard of that. Oh, sorry, wrong bit of paper. A film I like more than Necromantic, which you mentioned, he's very much in that vein of alternative love stories. Beyond the Darkness, Joe D'Amato's film from the late 70s, which I really like. If you haven't seen it, this is the one where there's a kind of Norman Bates with a late 70s perm. He's some real eye candy. He is.
Sexy back.
He's this kind of like Norman Bates, really. He's a taxidermist kind of misfit in the Italian countryside. His girlfriend dies horribly, and she's played by the blind one from the Beyond. But as in all of these love stories, death cannot separate them. So he digs her up, preserves her, dresses her up with the help of this weirdo housekeeper that periodically lets him suckle from her breasts, and paints her nails. Mm-hmm. and kills anyone that kind of finds out that he might be up to something. So I don't know if this is the first one, but there's a whole kind of tiny subgenre of necrophiliac love stories like Living Doll and Necromantic. But this is the one I like the most because it's this weird kind of slow-moving sort of art housey at some point thing, and I suppose it's one of those early slasher. Well, if you call it a slasher film, it's this early film where the main character is this obviously disturbed young man, a bit like the guy in Don't Go in the House, who brings home vulnerable girls, and then feeds them to his kind of in-house crematorium. It's really gruesome. It's got loads of organs being removed and stuff, but it's got that kind of tragic Norman Bates. Oh, he's bad, but I mean, he's probably just lonely. What's your thoughts on the Goblin disco dancing Beyond the Darkness movie?
The soundtrack, I don't actually remember that much, but as for the film, hasn't 88 Films put that out?
Actually, I think they have. Yeah, Italian collection. Yeah,
part of the Italian collection. Yeah, I remember. I think I've only seen it. I never seen it before. I bought it on the 88 Films disc, and when I first watched it's a Joe D'Amato film, so you're expecting some bonkers stuff anyway. So I watched it, and if I didn't know what this director was like with his stuff, then I would have went, yeah, I'm not going to watch this again. But because I've seen his sort of films, I know what I know what I'm in for. But if it's your first sort of delve into his films, you'll be thinking, what the hell have I just put myself in for?
Yeah, it's one of his best though, right? I mean, he's made some atrocious things.
Yeah, it's one of his better ones. You could tell sometimes the films that maybe he was given money to make just so he could fill in that gap before he can, or maybe he has to do this film, which maybe he doesn't want to particularly do. But if he does this film, the production company will give him X amount so he can make his film. But first, you got to make this film that he personally can't stand. But sometimes they actually turn out quite well. You could tell when he's reining himself in some of his films, though. Yeah,
for sure. And he made so many of them.
Yes. Some are good, some are bad.
But yeah, Beyond the Darkness. Yeah, I'd forgotten it was on the 88 line actually, and for a long time it was like on the bad list of films in Britain, Video Nasties list, I guess.
Yeah.
So the 88 release would have been, I guess the first time it was uncut over here, which is well worth checking out. Couple more. So love stories. There's a 80s sort of independent slasher movie type comedy that I really like called Psychos in Love from 1986. Have you seen Psychos in Love?
Psychos in Love? No, I haven't, but I'm sure Vinegar Syndrome have brought that out somewhere on the line.
That would make sense.
Oh, you let the folks know what it's about while I look it up.
Oh, there he is, tapping, always busy with his fingers. Yeah, this is an indie film, so very, very low budget film from the late 80s, and it was at that stage where the slasher movie cycle had come and gone and the parodies were kind of appearing. And it's about a lonely bartender who has basically a pathological hatred of grapes. And
who doesn't?
Exactly. Yeah, we all can share that. And he will tend to, he meets a girl, everything's going well, but if they turn out to love grapes, he will just kill them off with their head, which seems fair enough. Basically, the movie, as the title perhaps suggests, is that he meets someone, basically this kind of cheerful manicurist who herself is on her own murder rampage of stabbing men who are either sleazy or boring. They both love Chinese food. Great news. She hates grapes. They get married. They go on a kind of tour of slaughterhouses for their honeymoon. They start working on their own murders together. And the movie strays off a bit. It's a bit in the line of kind of stuff like Airplane and Naked Gun. So there's some jokes where the boom mic will be moved out of the shot. So there's some jokes like that remind us that we're watching a movie. It's got a joke in it that was later copied by Scary Movie where the camera pans to show the crew and the makeup effects artists, like with the blood pumps. So It's doing the stuff that Scream and Scary Movie thought they were doing for the first time.
Look how original we are. Oh, hang on.
15 years later. But it's also really sweet. I mean, the lead actors, Carmine Coppobianco and Debbie Thoibalt, however you say it, they're really fun. The throwaway jokes are good. It's got a really good video store sequence where they basically talk about all the famous slasher movies, and one of them's the lead character basically says he cried when Jason died at the end of part 4 of Friday the 13th. So it's good fun. Psychos in Love is one of those things that probably should be better known, and never has.
I've just looked it up, and it must be well known in certain circles because Vinegar Syndrome did put it out. And I love Vinegar Syndrome because they do pick up these films that potentially you've read in a book or something, and you thought, be really interested in that, but you never actually ever get around to it. And then what do you know? This company comes out who brings out these stuff, and you're always surprised. But they put loads of extras on their releases. I think the one you watched for me was Demon Wind.
Demon Wind, yeah,
which had loads of extras on it. But yeah, they go probably far and beyond to do their releases, like restoring and everything. Maybe some probably think does it really need restoring, but all the releases I got there so far I've enjoyed. So
yeah.
Anyway,
that's cracking news. Psychos in Love is deserving of that, and ahead of its time, as we said. It's doing jokes that years later mainstream Hollywood was doing like it was a new thing.
Oh,
that was me humming them.
Oh, you're humming.
Pretty harsh, wasn't it? Yeah, I can be harsh. 2 more, if you're up for it. 2 more horror love stories before we all tuck ourselves into bed and finish ourselves off. One is one that I know you'd have seen from 2009 called The Loved Ones.
The Loved Ones. Yes, I did see that. Again, I've only seen it once, and that was probably when it came out. So I don't actually remember much about it.
The Loved Ones. I don't think you were there. Oh, maybe you were, but I saw The Loved Ones at Fright Fest in, I guess it was 2009 actually. And from memory, it was in a double bill. It was like the very last film of the night on a Sunday night, I think, after Buried, the Ryan Reynolds film. I may be wrong, but that's kind of what rings a bell. But there were 2 really cool films in a row, and this was one of them. And this is the film, Australian film directed by Sean Byrne, where this kind of tragically lonely girl becomes obsessed with a very handsome chap who's himself is really emotionally unhinged, which makes him much more interesting than he might otherwise be. So she gets together with her dad, who you get the impression probably fancies her, which is a bit awkward. They abduct him, tie him to a chair, and they basically groom him as her prom date. Because she can't get a boyfriend through conventional means, which of course we've all tried, and sometimes this is the only thing you can do.
That does all sound vaguely familiar. Not the bit about trying to tie somebody up to a chair, but the movie itself.
Oh, sure.
Oh, no, the other bit sound pretty.
Me too.
Well.
Hashtag what? Oh, sure. So yeah, I would go as far to say that The Loved Ones has one of the great psychos of the, I suppose in this case we're talking about what do you call the first decade of the 2000s?
I just call it the 2000s.
Oh, the 2000s.
I think I would just call it the 2000s, and then the later part I call the teens.
Oh, and now we're in the 20s.
We're in the 20s. Yeah, we can say we lived in the rip-roaring 20s.
The roaring 20s. Oh,
fantastic. You're thinking of the wrong 20s. Nope, definitely think of this one.
Yep, Wall Street crash and all.
Yep.
Al Capone. So it's great. I mean, the cool thing, there's many great things about this, and the director's really talented. He went on to direct something that I've just immediately forgotten, which is the kind of heavy metal horror film.
Heavy Metal Zombies.
Not that one. The Devil's Candy.
Yeah.
Which is actually really good.
Wasn't the film I was thinking you were thinking of. I was thinking of something else, but yeah, I was thinking of that metal horror movie where they use the dildos as weapons, which I can't remember. Deathgasm. I thought that's
Deathgasm is great. Oh no, yeah, absolutely forgot about Dead Girl. Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, this is a very much a twisted love story. I mean, the main character, you feel very sorry for her. She's this kind of childlike, very lonely, pitiful figure, but she's also absolutely brutal. But she's got this fairy tale dream of being in love with some handsome prince, and she doesn't mind that if to get that handsome prince, she has to shove a drill through his head and knife his feet to the floor so he doesn't move, and inject him with bleach.
Means to an end.
Yeah, yeah, we've all done it. And
sometimes love is hard to get, and if there's only one way of doing it, then that's how you do it.
But it's got this great kind of perverse 50s look, so it's all mirror balls and weird dolls and girly colours and stuff, and she's knifing this guy to the floor, and there's this sense of some of the best moments in it. I mean, it's playing with the torture stuff that was big in the early 2000s. And there's a scene where she's rubbish at trying to drill him in the head to lobotomize him, and it feels a bit like the scene in Texas Chainsaw where the granddad keeps dropping the hammer when he's trying to bludgeon the girl to death. But she's great. She's an amazing character, and she has a suitably gruesome end at the very end. But The Loved Ones, yeah, it's one of the best horrors of this century. I don't know, is that too much? Sounds a bit dramatic. Well, probably.
Well, at the moment, it's you're only 20 years into the century, so maybe at the moment it probably doesn't sound that bad, but maybe in 2099 somebody go, well, hang on a minute, this is a bit like those people that say the best movie of the year, January 1st.
The greatest romantic comedy of 2020. Oh yeah, I wonder what episode we'll be doing in 2099.
Episode 5.
Yeah, I suppose we'll be up to that by then, won't we? For sure. Yeah. And the last one I've got of this actually really quite sentimental and lovey-dovey list is a film called Love Object from 2003 or 2003.
Never even heard of that.
Oh, cross that one off. Obscure.
No. You can tell the people. Tell the masses.
If you're sure. I mean, I hate to rabbit on. So yeah, this is a film I wanted to give a shout out to because it fits into this category of what we've been talking about. And I don't think it's mentioned enough. It was in the early-ish days of DVD where, I don't know about you, but I was using websites like, I think it was called dvdconcept.com, maybe.
Yeah, that does sound about right. Or dvdcompare.com or something.
Compare, and there was Play USA. There was play.com, but there was also playusa.com, which would be a good source of importing American DVD because all the really meaty stuff was coming from America, and Region 1. And this was one of them. It was like released by Lionsgate, probably straight to DVD. I don't think it got a theatrical release. And it's got Desmond Harrington, who popped up in a few things along these kind of early 2000s. Like he's in Wrong Turn, and I believe he's in The Hole, the creepy British sort of maybe kind of slasher film.
The Hole, is that Billy Piper? Is that The Hole?
No, it's not Billy Piper's Hole. It's Thora Birch's Hole.
Oh, okay. I got the wrong hole.
Yeah.
They all look the same in the end.
He always gets the wrong hole, but he always apologizes, and that's the main thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Always put your hands up when you put your things in the wrong hole.
Oh, I always put my hand up there.
Yep.
So Desmond, this is another. I mean, horror movies, probably not by coincidence, often feature tragically lonely people as the heroes or the anti-heroes, and this is one of them. I mean, he's this lonely chap. Hilarious. I mean, the cast is mad. So he has this rubbish apartment. He has to spend his evenings listening to his landlord, played by Udo Kier, having sex with someone. Can you imagine that? Going to sleep with Udo Kier shagging upstairs.
I could never imagine that.
I just did, and it's fantastic.
Imagine him in his puppet master costume.
Ye gods, that's really sexy. Something else that I can never relate to. I mean, he has a really repetitive, quite boring day job. He basically he has to write the manuals for electrical appliances. So
that sounds quite exciting. That might be riveting.
and
green wire.
And he's really in love with his work colleague. So he does the thing that we've all done. He basically goes to a website, which in 2003 was probably way ahead of its time, but now we're all doing it. This website that manufactures anatomically accurate, photorealistic sex dolls of anyone that you want to choose. So naturally, he chooses a sex doll to be made in the likeness of this girl that he fancies at work. And the movie's obviously quite unsettling, and it gets to the point where the woman he really fancies at work actually is happy to date him after all, because he's quite handsome, he's a bit weird. But of course, it turns out that when they finally get to date for real, she doesn't live up to all the expectations he's built up from the real girl, and it all ends up quite badly with this kind of, probably as you'd expect, downbeat twist or two. I mean, the movie is, Love Object's really good. I mean, it's basically, I suppose, a theme that is even more timely now about how we're all kind of automatons in our day job, and how a lot of us find it easier to relate to somebody that's a doll than actually the hassle of finding relationships with real people. Go check it out.
What was it called?
Love Object from 2003. I wrote down the director's name somewhere. Directed by, not Joe D'Amato, that's somebody else. Directed by, he's back. Joe D'Amato. A comeback. He's got the new Transformers film. Directed by Robert Parigi.
All right, okay. I do recognise that name.
It's somebody. It's Udo Kier. There's a couple of famous faces in supporting roles. Desmond Harrington is really good, playing a kind of, again, another, I suppose, kind of Norman Bates type that you feel sorry for, you quite like, but ultimately he goes too far.
Well, there's enough there in what we gave, not just in the obvious Valentine's one, but there's enough in mainly your list of ones people should check out if they just fancy maybe something slightly different to sit down with their Valentine's date if they have one, or maybe they're like some of us that don't have anybody. We just sit at home alone, wondering.
Yeah.
And, So yeah, that was that. That was that. So
yeah, that was that indeed. Yeah.
You want to let the folks at home, or maybe not listening, maybe not at home, maybe not at work, maybe they're doing something we shouldn't be doing, but
or on the move.
Yeah, so I don't know when they're on the moon, but they could be on the moon. But let them know any projects you're currently in progress on.
Oh, projects. I'm doing a couple of things for a book that young Eric McNaughton is doing for his We Belong Dead kind of spin-off publications, Spotlight on Horror, which is a collection of reviews of various significant horror films from the last however many years cinema has been existing. So I'm doing a thing about the Blair Witch Project, and also a thing about Session 9 for this book, which will be coming down the pike this year.
Yeah. Talking of that book, I know somebody else is doing something for that.
Who is it? Is it Sir David Attenborough?
No, it's not.
Is it? Oh, wait a minute. Is it the woman that played Mrs. Mangle in Neighbours?
No.
I give up.
It's better than those two.
Someone sexy, isn't it?
Or maybe worse than those two. I don't know.
Wow.
It's me!
Plot twist alert!
I'm doing the werewolf versus the vampire woman.
Wow. Is that the Paul Nash one?
Yeah.
Nashy. Oh, we need to have Paul Nashy on the show. Or if he's not available, talk about Paul Nashy.
I think we're going to have to talk about him.
Oh, what? We can do that.
Yeah. That's what I decided. Yeah, because he put a thing up saying he was looking for new people to do some other things. And I thought, that's the film. That's the film I want.
It's a great one. Yeah, that's all right.
There you go. See? I don't know if you knew about that already. Maybe Eric's already told you. I don't know.
No, he tells me nothing. He just rolls over and lets me finish off.
Oh, but there you go. See, you got to find out on the air live with everybody else.
Oh, God. Well, I can beat that. Well, I'm pregnant. And it's yours.
Okay. Well, if it's a boy...
Mm-hmm.
I'll discuss this another time, actually.
Yeah,
but,
that's fair enough.
There is that book coming out, which as we just mentioned, Stephen's writing quite a few articles for, and I'm doing my first thing. So, yeah, we shall see that comes out. It's called Spotlight on Horror. So I don't know personally when it comes out, but as Stephen said, it probably come out later in this year. So just on We Belong Dead's website and their Facebook page, which I believe is just called We Belong Dead.
Yeah, man, and they've done a bunch of books. I mean, I've been involved in some of them, but they're all really, really good. Like there's A Century of Horror, which is a trip through each decade of horror films with a different writer talking about, the 20s through to the, I think it ends at the 90s, that one. But yeah, he's knocking out these coffee table full color books like there's no tomorrow.
Son of Horror and Son of Unsung Horrors.
Yes, that's it. A Vincent Price one, which was called Into the Velvet Darkness. A Cushing one as well, which is out. I mean, a lot of them are out of print, right? So you know.
So as usually with the books that We Belong Dead, same with their the magazine that they put out. It's probably best as soon as it comes out to buy it there and then, because if you try and get it on like eBay or something, you're going to be paying twice, maybe sometimes 3 times the price of what it is. So
yeah, which is a real shame, actually.
Yeah. Well, it's good in a way that it's reaching a bigger market in that way, but it's a shame that maybe somebody's just gone out and bought a load just so they can flog it off at a higher price.
Yeah.
But there you go. That's the things that happen. So, yeah. So, that's this episode over and done with. Unless Stephen's got anything else he would like to say to you lovely, lovely people.
No, I think that's it. I mean, if anyone's interested, I'm going to go and see the new Grudge movie this week. Yep.
Very quiet in the background.
I'm sorry?
So it's gone very quiet in the background.
Oh, I thought I heard crickets. Is that church bell? I mean, it's too late for the church.
There's a big tumbleweed going through. What's that?
Choir of small children. Well, the thing is, if I don't go and see it, then they might not make any more. And of course, I'm responsible for this. Oh, God.
But, yeah, I mean, I had seen the trailer to it, but all I thought was, oh, good, it's that film. Remake again.
It's been at least a few years since the last one was being.
It's not saying, I'll see. I know why you would go, because you've got the pass to go see it anyway. But me, I'm kind of like, I'll just wait till it comes out on whatever and then watch it that way, because there's nothing special to that. My film this year is the new Bond film and the new Ghostbusters film. That's the 2 films I'll definitely be going to the cinema for. So
I did see a trailer for the new Bond film. Yeah, that is jolly good. Jolly good.
Watched the trailer for the Ghostbusters film yet?
I've seen. I presume it's the only one. I've seen a trailer, which which was very much a tease.
Yes, very much a tease. But yeah, that looks pretty good. I'm looking forward to seeing that. So that's this episode over and done with then. And next episode, Stephen, this is Stephen's choice.
Next episode, which is episode 5.
Yep. Oh, you take it away. You let people know what the film is.
Oh, what, me? I've never done this before. Oh, I've gone all shy. Crumbs. I say. Next episode is going to be a retro rewind on Herschel Gordon Lewis's The Gorgor Girls.
Yes, from 1972, which is a comedy horror film, which is his last film really directing until Blood Feast 2.
Yeah, massive gap. He's got a massive gap.
Well, yeah, 30 years in between that. So, yeah, it's going to be a good one to look at, because there's the obvious choices we could have done, which are Blood Feast and The Wizard of Gore, but go for something slightly different of his catalogue. So there's that, and plus, because it's Women in Horror Month / History Month, we will be doing a general look at women in horror, not just in front of the camera, so like the Scream Queens, but also people behind the cameras, so like the script writers and mainly the directors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I imagine there's going to be quite a few for that. Behind it, there's definitely more nowadays than there used to be, which is a good thing.
There is, actually, yeah. The last year, like movies like The Wind and The Nightingale, a whole bunch of them actually were by female directors.
The Wind.
Who's it?
The Wind. The Wind I thought was awesome.
Oh, The Wind is great. The Wind, yeah. I mean, when we're doing the top 10 list, it was a nightmare, I tell you, because things like The Wind got breezed out because there were so many other There were so many other really good. You're welcome. So many other good films out, but yeah, in any other year, The Wind would have blown into the top 10.
Yeah.
And of course, we shouldn't forget things like the female writer and director of the Slumber Party Massacre.
Mm-hmm.
There's a host of them.
God
damn it.
A lot of the sort of like exploitation films of the 70s and 80s, surprisingly, a lot of them were written by women.
Yes, Catchy Rubin. It's coming. Strip to Kill.
There you go. Yeah, so there's a lot of that. A lot of people sort of see, the misogynistic side of it is, but really a lot of it was written by women. So,
and actually, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we can obviously chew this over next time, but I would argue that the horror genre, probably more than any other genre, especially when you look at westerns and I don't know, sex comedies and stuff, has historically had really positive and forward-thinking roles for women. And what I think the world needs is two aging white men to talk about the role of women in horror in episode 5, coming very soon.
Yeah, in fact, Steve, it's not coming soon. It's coming. Well, it's coming soon, but it's coming sooner than you think. It's coming as like every podcast that we do, the last Friday of the month, which will be the 28th of February, 2020. So you have H.G. Lewis's The Gore Girls to look forward to, not in person, and general look at women in horror, all coming to you 28th of February, 2020. Available on all your favourite podcast providers. If you can't find us, just search up Horror Screams Podcast, and we should pop up on your screen or device or wherever you're looking at us from. So until then, from me and Stephen, it is goodbye.
Yes, thanks for listening. I'm just going to get checked out for the coronavirus.